The sun dipped low behind the sprawling Montana hills, painting the sky in streaks of amber and gold. Dust trailed behind a black stallion as it galloped down the dirt road, ridden by a man whose name carried more weight than most towns in the state. Jace Holloway, the Millionaire Cowboy. He wasn't born rich. He earned every cent with grit, hard hands, and a mind sharp as a blade. Ranches, oil fields, and cattle auctions all bore his brand somewhere. But despite his fortune, Jace lived like a man still earning his keep. That morning he'd ridden farther north than usual, looking for stray cattle rumored to have wandered off near the valley edge. What he found instead was something else. A tiny cabin almost lost in the wilderness, smoke rising weakly from its crooked chimney. Out front stood an old man splitting firewood, his back bent with age, his hands trembling with effort. "Evenin'," Jace called, pulling on the reins. The old man turned, wiping his brow with a worn handkerchief. "Evenin', stranger. You're far from town." His voice cracked, but his eyes were kind. "Name's Jace Holloway," the cowboy said, tipping his hat. "Lost a few head of cattle. Thought they might have come this way." The old man chuckled softly. "Ain't seen no cattle. Just rabbits in the wind." Something about the man's frailness tugged at Jace's heart. "You need help with that wood?" Jace asked. The old man smiled shyly. "You don't look like the helping kind, Mr. Holloway. You look like the kind who hires folks to do the helpin'." Jace dismounted anyway. "Then maybe I'm changin' my ways." They worked side by side for an hour, Jace chopping thick logs like they were matchsticks, the old man stacking them slowly but neatly. When they were done, the old man's wife appeared in the doorway, holding a kettle of stew. Her gray hair was tied back, her eyes soft as candlelight. "Won't you join us, son?" she asked warmly. Jace hesitated, then nodded. The inside of the cabin was humble, just 2 wooden chairs, a table and a small fire that crackled in the hearth. But what struck Jace wasn't the poverty, it was the peace. The old couple, whose names were Eli and Martha, spoke gently to one another, laughing softly as if they had no troubles in the world. Jace hadn't heard laughter like that in years. After supper, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You two got anyone to help around here?" Eli shook his head. "Just us now. Used to have hands once, long ago. They all gone to find better pay or better weather." Jace glanced at the tools near the door, old, rusted, almost useless. "How do you manage?" he asked quietly. Martha smiled sadly. "We get by. The Lord's been kind." Something in Jace stirred then, something beyond charity, beyond pride. "Listen," he said, setting his hat on the table. "I've got a big ranch 2 counties south. I could use folks like you to manage my feed barns and keep the horses watered. Ain't heavy work, and I'll pay you proper wages." Eli blinked, stunned. "Oh, you'd pay us? For chores we already do?" Jace nodded. "Every month, no questions asked." The old man's lip trembled. "Mr. Holloway? That's too kind. We couldn't." "You can," Jace said firmly. "And you will." The next day, he rode back to town and arranged for monthly payments, to be sent directly to Eli and Martha, no strings attached. It became routine. Every month, they'd receive their envelope, and Jace would visit when his travels brought him near. The couple treated him like a son, and in their company, Jace found something he'd lost long ago, quiet belonging. But one winter evening, when snow dusted the world white, Jace rode up again to deliver supplies personally. The light from the cabin flickered weakly. Something felt off. He tied his horse and knocked, but no one answered. Pushing the door open, he stepped inside. The cabin was warm but empty. On the table lay an envelope addressed to him, sealed with trembling handwriting. He opened it slowly. Inside, a letter. "Dear Jace, if you're reading this, then we're gone. The Lord called us home. But before you think us alone or poor, know this. We were never truly alone. The cabin you helped keep standing has been more than our home. It's been a haven for many, though you never knew. Go to the back room and you'll understand. Thank you, son. You've done more good than you know." Jace's chest tightened. He walked to the back room, heart pounding. The door creaked open, and then he froze. The dim lantern light revealed a dozen small beds, neatly made, lined up like a dormitory. Old toys sat on a shelf. A child's drawing hung crooked on the wall, labeled in crayon, "Our Home." Jace's breath caught. He realized in an instant, the cabin wasn't just the old couple's home. It was an orphan's house. He turned and sank to his knees, the letter trembling in his hands. "They never told me," he whispered. The millionaire cowboy, who had built empires and managed fortunes, felt suddenly small before the legacy of two humble hearts, who had given everything quietly, and in that silence the only sound was the soft rustle of the letter and the creak of floorboards. Under the weight of truth, the morning after the storm broke, the sun rose like a promise over the valley, bright, merciful, and still. Jace Holloway stood outside the little cabin, his gloved hands trembling slightly as he looked out across the snow-covered fields. The letter from Eli and Martha was folded in his coat pocket, pressed close to his heart. He had spent the night inside, sitting silently by the dying fire, unable to shake the image of those tiny beds lined against the back wall. The smell of old wood and faint lavender still lingered in the air, as if Martha herself had just walked through the room. For the first time in years, the millionaire cowboy felt utterly lost. He had money enough to build cities, cattle enough to fill counties, but standing there, he realized he'd never truly known what giving meant. The couple he'd been helping had been helping others all along, orphans, abandoned souls, children no one wanted. Jace pushed open the small back door and stepped outside. Behind the cabin lay a tiny garden, overgrown and frozen, but still marked by love. Handmade crosses stood near a tree, each with a name carved faintly into the wood: Anna, Luke, Sarah, Daniel. He ran his hand over the names, realizing they weren't graves, they were memorials, perhaps for children who'd come and gone, or for those who had once found warmth here. His chest tightened. The old couple hadn't been alone. They had been caretakers of forgotten hearts. The thought burned in him like wildfire. He couldn't leave it as it was. Jace mounted his horse and rode straight back to town, determination flaring in his eyes. He went to the courthouse, found the local registrar, and asked about Eli and Martha Cole. The clerk, a young man who knew every gossip of the county, looked surprised. "Oh, them? They've been running that cabin near Miller's Creek for years. Folks said they took in kids from all over, orphans. Runaways, some left right at their door. Never asked for help, never took charity." Jace frowned. "No one knew?" The clerk shrugged. "They didn't talk about it. They just did it." By the time Jace left the courthouse, a decision had taken root in his heart. He wasn't going to let that legacy vanish. Over the next weeks, the cabin that once stood silent began to change. Carpenters came, builders came, painters came. Jace oversaw everything personally, every board replaced, every bed restored. When they asked what it was all for, he simply said, "A home for those who don't have one." He spent evenings cleaning the walls himself, sometimes finding little handprints of children long gone. He left them there, refusing to paint over them. They were part of the story. As word spread, townsfolk came to see. Some donated old furniture. Others brought food or blankets. For once, the wealthy cowboy wasn't the man at the top of the hill. He was among them, sleeves rolled, boots in the mud, rebuilding something bigger than himself. When the work was done, a new sign hung over the doorway: the Holloway Orphans' Home in memory of Eli and Martha Cole. The day it opened, the snow melted and spring bloomed as if heaven itself approved. The first children arrived quietly, 3 of them, brought by a traveling pastor who had found them wandering near the train line. They were thin, afraid, and silent. Jace knelt down before them, his wide hat shadowing his face. "You don't need to be scared," he said softly. "This place is safe. You can stay here as long as you want." One little girl, with tangled hair and wide eyes, whispered, "Are you the man who built this?" Jace smiled faintly. "No, little one. I'm just keeping it alive." She hesitated, then threw her arms around his neck, and in that instant, Jace Holloway felt richer than he'd ever felt signing a deal or buying a ranch. Weeks turned into months. The home grew, filled with laughter, voices, the sound of little boots running on the porch. Jace often visited, bringing gifts or teaching the boys how to rope or ride. Sometimes he'd sit on the porch at sunset, looking out at the hills where it all began. He could almost see Eli chopping wood again, Martha smiling from the door, and he'd whisper, "You did good, old folks. You did real good." But one evening, something happened that changed him even more. A woman in her 30s arrived, holding a child by the hand. She wore a tattered shawl and carried nothing else. "Are you Mr. Holloway?" she asked quietly. "I heard this was a place that helps folks." Jace nodded. "It is? You need a place to stay?" The woman shook her head slowly. "Not for me. For her." She nudged the little girl forward, eyes glistening. I can't care for her anymore. I'm sick, and I was once one of the children who lived here. Eli and Martha raised me. Jace's breath caught. You? She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. They told us stories about a kind man who helped them keep the lights on. Said his name was Jace Holloway. They said you'd come around one day, and when you did, to tell you thank you for keeping the orphans warm. He couldn't speak. He knelt down, touched the little girl's shoulder, and smiled gently. You'll be safe here, sweetheart. I promise. The mother pressed her lips together, her voice breaking. Then I can rest easy. She left quietly into the evening, and Jace stood watching her go until she disappeared into the golden dust. That night, sitting by the fire with the children gathered around, Jace told them a story, not about himself, but about two old souls who lived in a little cabin and gave everything they had to others. He told them how kindness doesn't die, it just passes on to new hands. The children listened, wide-eyed, and when he finished, one of the boys asked, Mr. Holloway, why do you do all this? Jace looked into the flames and said softly, because someone once showed me what real wealth looks like. Years later, travelers passing through that valley would still find that house standing strong, its porch full of laughter and the smell of bread in the air. Locals said that sometimes late at night, you could see a tall cowboy sitting out front beneath the stars, talking softly as if to two old friends. And though no one knew what he said, they knew it wasn't business, it was gratitude. As the years rolled on, the Holloway Orphans' home became a legend. People from all over came to help, donate, or adopt. But every wall, every plank, every echo of laughter carried one unspoken message that the richest hearts aren't the ones that take, but the ones that give quietly. And as Jace looked out one final time over the home that now bustled with life, he smiled and whispered, Eli, Martha, you gave them a home. I just made sure the door stayed open. He turned to the camera then, his voice calm but firm. Friends, sometimes a small act of kindness can light up someone's whole life. Don't let your blessings stop with you, pass them on. And if you believe in keeping that light alive, hit that subscribe button, join our family, and let's keep spreading stories that warm the heart and remind the world that goodness still rides among us. And with that, the millionaire cowboy rode off into the horizon, not away from his fortune, but toward the true legacy he'd helped build, one born not of money but of mercy.